Okay. Okay. So again, a really warm welcome. I'm thrilled today to welcome Nancy Markow to chat with us about the link between our personality structures and that we'll look at through the lens of the Enneagram and how that impacts our personality-driven stress and what causes us stress in our lives. And Nancy is passionate about the Enneagram, yoga, meditation, spirituality, metaphysics, and how they all highlight the importance of a loving relationship with one's self with a capital F. In 2006, Nancy founded Connecting You with Yourself, a now free online community offering a place to learn, share, and participate. And you can learn more about Nancy's offerings at www.connectingyouwithyourself.com. And personally, I met Nancy, it was a couple of summers ago now, and I didn't know her, and we both were at the International Enneagram Conference in San Francisco. And I went, and I really didn't know a lot of people. And one of the first people I met was Nancy, and her warmth, her generosity, her level of commitment, and the experience with the Enneagram just blew me away. And she was one of these people that just immediately wanted to share freely all of her wisdom, all of her knowledge, all of her deep heart with those of us that are newer to the Enneagram. And so I've just been deeply grateful to have met Nancy, and I'm really thrilled that she's here with us to chat with us today. And really, why did I reach out to Nancy to have her talk with us about the Enneagram as it relates to stress? And I think if there's one thing we know in our lives is life is stressful. And I was just listening to Mel Robbins had a short clip of Gabor Mate this morning talking about why there's so much autoimmune illness and why and especially amongst women, and what is that about? And he was talking about the root of a lot of that is stress. The root of a lot of that is being disconnected from ourselves and being people pleasers and conditioned to, what does it mean to be a good woman? And this is really impacting our health. So I know for me, as I look back, all those years I wasn't aware of the Enneagram, and I realized that so much of those habits, so much of those things that impacted my health, I wasn't aware of because it's like in we're swimming in a fishbowl and we don't see it. And so it wasn't until I discovered the Enneagram that I'm like, oh my goodness, these are habits that used to serve me, but don't serve me any longer. And I need to do something to become aware and shift them because they were impacting my health. And I truly have believed that the Enneagram helps us to see it's a map. And then when you combine that with meditation and mindfulness, that helps to actually change things. So the map is helpful, but without the tools to actually shift things, you can get stuck in an intellectual understanding, but you're not necessarily shifting. So with that, Nancy, I would love for you to share with us. Um, Tell us a bit about even what is the Enneagram for people that aren't as familiar, and how did you learn about it? How did it come into your life?
Bev, for having me, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. To me, the Enneagram is a collection of truths, and it's under this umbrella of the Enneagram. It is both a um, sacred teaching with sacred geometry and sacred laws that then fueled the Enneagram of personality. So I really like to explain it that it really is two things. It's the very deeply spiritual, metaphysical, teachings. And then from that came the Enneagram of Personality. And I just want to second what you said, that the Enneagram of Personality without the mindfulness is often just fueling information in our head. But to really make it meaningful, we need to take it out of our head through the practices that you're you're offering and you're teaching and you're instructing on, is how to bring it out of our head and into our heart, and most importantly into our lives, into how we're acting and reacting. And how it came to my world was many, many, many years ago when my adult children were in middle school, two young women who were melting down every day. Um, and at the same time, my marriage was coming apart, and I was looking for help, for wisdom. And a friend said, you should learn the Enneagram. And it's been a long journey, just about 30 years for me. I first learned the Enneagram personality, and then I later came in to, had an epiphany at one point with a friend. I was like, yeah, I know all this knowledge, but it's not changing my life.
Mm, mm,
And that's when I got into what I'm really passionate about today, is really giving people the practices to take the information into their life.
And I think that's why, you just end up clicking with people and their approach. And it was one of the things I also most respected and loved about your work is that you have this deep knowledge of this very powerful tool, the Enneagram and the map and all that's inherent in that. But you also integrate that into yoga and the practice. And I attended some of your practices in San Francisco, and you embody that sense of integrating those three centers of intelligence. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about that. So tell us, maybe summarize, okay, what are what does it mean about nine personality types? And where does these centers of intelligence fit into that? And why is that helpful to know as it relates to us living less stressful, more peaceful lives with greater ease?
So I'm going to be sharing in a few minutes something that could take years to
Yeah,
unpack. So just
yeah.
so you know that I'm going to be giving the very abbreviated version. When you think of the Enneagram symbol, it's made up of three shapes of sacred geometry: a circle, a triangle, and a hexad. Each of those has got a lot of information to it. But for today, we're going to say, okay, now you've got this symbol. You can picture it in your mind, a circle with a triangle in the middle and a hexad over the top. And then we divide that symbol into three parts using the points that are created by the triangle and the hexad in the circle, which creates three centers. The three centers relate to our three centers of intelligence in our being. We have mental intelligence. Most people are familiar with that. We also have heart intelligence that's very validated by heart math, if anybody's heard of that. And then we have instinctual intelligence that has been validated by Indigenous people since the beginning of time. Each one of these centers has 3 points to it that relates to three of the Enneagram personality types or patterns. Dan Siegel wants us to now move to the word patterns away from type. And I really agree with that. It describes patterns of the personality that have a spectrum. They have a spectrum from being our greatest gift to being our biggest hurdle, or what causes us the most stress in this instance. And it is the forgetting of the gift that causes the stress. And so there are three: the body type is the body center intelligence, the instinctual intelligence that we have. This is like our gut instincts, is in the body center, which is in points 8, 9, and 1, those personalities. Heart center, which is our emotional intelligence, which I have to preface, most of us are not taught about emotional intelligence. We're taught to either become our emotions or deny our emotions. Neither one of them is letting us get the benefit of the intelligence. We want to be able to step out of our emotion and look at it with curiosity. What is this emotion telling me about my choices, how I'm navigating life? What is my emotion guiding me to do? And that's points 2, 3, and 4 around the circle. And then, of course, there is the head intelligence, um, which is not about thinking, but about allowing wisdom to come through. So it's about separating, seeing your thoughts as what they are. They're something that are malleable, there's something we can direct. It's not easy to undo a gerbil wheel of thought, but to separate, to step out of our thoughts so that we can say, is this thought serving me? Is this thought my highest way of being? Or is this thought where I'm falling into suffering? Is it fueling that? And that's points 5, 6, and 7. Was that enough for right now?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really helpful. And then to build on that, perhaps, there's 9 personality patterns, and there's 3 of those are based in the head, in the mind, 3 in the heart, emotions, and then the third in the body, the gut. And we also know the Enneagram is the key to understanding our actual type or our habit. And we have to, I often like to describe this Enneagram too. I don't know if this resonates, but I think of a turtle in the sense of the turtle needed its shell and needs a shell for protection. It needs that, and our personality becomes that part of us that we needed to have, and we need to have a personality. The point is not to not have a personality. The point is to have a healthy one, but that we're more than our shell, and we're more than that. The turtle is not the shell. The turtle has a shell and it needs it for protection, and that's the same as our personality. But I've also found it really helpful when I get kind of overwhelmed in the Enneagram world, because there's so many, it's so deep, and yet it's also so helpful. It really comes down to what motivates us. Like, what is our key motivation? And I maybe you could explain just briefly about what are the motivations of each of the 9 types so that people can see, that resonates with me. Like me, for example, as a type 9, what motivates me is to keep the peace. I'm the peacemaker. And while that is a wonderful thing, and it's not ironic that here I'm teaching meditation and I focus on peace. But when I wasn't aware of my personality and my motivation to keep the peace, I would avoid conflict to the point of losing myself. It was like, oh, I'll be all peaceful. So that gift became a thing that ended up getting me into a lot of trouble. In that my desire for peace, my motivation, was preventing me from going into the healthy conflict that I needed to go in order to truly have my needs, my dreams, my agenda, because and express opinions. And so breaking out of that and being more than the shell was not really very comfortable. So maybe could you just briefly say what motivates each of the types, because then it also gives people a flavor of how we all see the world differently and how the motivations can at sometimes ultimately cause us a stress and a disconnection from our true selves. So I'll leave that.
Yeah. Visually, I like to show what you were just saying is our personalities are is my fingers. And what I don't want is my first personality to be my blind spot. So not letting me see it all. I
Ah,
want to keep my personality. I'm not going to get rid of it. It's
right.
very purposeful, but I want it to be out here instead of blocking me. And so
Nice.
going back to the centers for the body center where you're navigating from, the we have to remember the spectrum. It's so important. It's not taught enough that each type has a spectrum. And so for the all three body types, 8, 9, and 1, the ultimate path is to connection, to remember we're all, it goes to the law of one, we're all one, unity in diversity. So we're all unique little people, but we're all made of the same stardust, to make it very basic. So for point 8, they are bringing this connection together because they're motivated by truth.
Okay.
Where they fall into stress is when it's ego truth instead of ego less truth. So my truth, and then they fall into contraction and control and aggression. And, I'm going to overpower you. Point 9, like you said, you did a great description. There's so many nuances to the types, but I see point 9 as the gift of point 9 is this ability to love, to see the connection through a bigger lens. So I can see how it all fits together for the 9. And then the 9 gets contracted and suffering because the whole is not always peaceful. It's got all this diversity to it that doesn't naturally, it doesn't agree. And it doesn't agree because it's not supposed to, because it's supposed to have all these unique components, which then the 9 contracts because they can see all the pieces. But imagine that. I mean, you know it for yourself. You see all the pieces, it becomes too much. And so the 9 wants to go into a peaceful place, which is contracted. The type 1 sees when the type 1, the high side of the type 1 is they see the perfection in the imperfection. They have this ability of acceptance of the all and the diversity in it all. And they contract when they get narrow into the fear of not being good enough, or things not being good enough, or in alignment enough, or enough order. And they contract into the fear that causes them to show up judgmental, critical, critical of themselves, critical of others. So that's basically for the body center. The heart center, my home place that I navigate from, our gift that we bring is this emotional intelligence to remember we are all love. We are all love at the core of our being. It gets contracted, the heart gets shut down by trauma and training and negative experiences. And we fall into shame and guilt and lack. And the type 2 is seeking uh, this freedom to just love everybody, to, moving from the body center, this connection. So we get the connection, and then we just want to include everyone. And we get contracted, we fall into stress when we forget to include ourselves. So the type 2 focuses on others, forgetting themselves, and then There's whole lots of stories there. The type 3 holds holy hope, and they're motivated by bringing forth this positivity, this success, this remembering of all of who we are. And they forget it when they fall into overdoing. So being a human doer instead of a human being, where they fall into arrogance. Anyway, I'm trying to keep it simple so we can get around the whole simple.
Yeah.
And then point four reminds us of the spectrum. So 4.4 brings us to remembering our uniqueness. So at the most awakened, they're motivated by being unique, by celebrating the uniqueness in us all. They get contracted when they forget their own uniqueness, when they fall into that lack, that shame, that guilt that the heart types fall into, and that all of us fall into at our heart. So, moving along up into the head center, points 5, 6, and 7. The head center brings us all this ability to have faith and trust. And this is not in an outer source, it's in remembering the God within that, from a Christian perspective, God made us in its image. It comes with a lot of responsibility of remembering to show up with love, with connection. So it's bringing us all back to the whole, faith and trust to be in the right place at the right time with the right people, the right words, with a connection to our inner guidance, our high mind. And point 5 is brings us consciousness when they're most awake. That's what they're trying to bring us, and they lose it into stress when they're focused on needing more information. They're narrowing down. I had a little note here. They get disengaged and occupied in the quest of more knowledge. Point 6 brings us awakeness. They're people who have a lot of interpersonal skills at their highest way of being, and they forget it. They fall into stress with actual the idea of of stress. So this mental angst, this cautiousness, this distrusting, this suspiciousness, and point 7, they bring us just this wonder and excitement about life and living and being here and enjoying, and they fall into stress with this idea of confinement. I don't have enough choices. The head center is around safety, security, forgetting that safety and security comes through inner guidance.
Well done. Going
That's
around
a lot.
and it is a lot. It is a lot. And that's the thing. I mean, that's why once you learn the Enneagram and start to pay attention, it becomes a journey. It is not just a quick thing because it really helps us to see our habits that you just described so beautifully, our conditioned patterns. But the other really powerful thing is it's how do you move past them, how to actually move on that journey towards a greater sense of wholeness, integrating those parts of ourselves that we needed to leave behind. So you did a beautiful job. And the other piece I just want to highlight also with what you shared is the realization when I learned the Enneagram, and I had been teaching meditation for a few years, and even if people don't know the Enneagram, things would shift inside them in a natural way from meditation. So it was almost like if you do the practices, things will shift. Those, you'll create a deeper balance that we were talking about between the centers. But when you know the Enneagram, you can be way more intentional. And I think where we're getting to in a place in terms of the meditation or mindfulness world is definitely not a one size fits all approach. And what is going to work for me and where my focus and what's going to help me grow into the best version of myself is going to be a different path than someone else. So I always, now that I see the Enneagram and I understand that, I get a bit cringy when I hear blanket like, well, everybody needs to be less selfish, for example. Like, and we know there's certain personality types that the growth for them, we don't, even if we didn't use that word, is to be more self-focused.
Yeah,
So
you're
they,
in my type.
right?
You're in mine.
Right. So as women, it's like, oh, self-sacrificing, and then the guilt that arises when we start to see that, wow, that's not a healthy version of myself, to
Can
be
I,
self-sacrificing, to um
Ellen? Yeah, can I interject something? I mean, I don't know if that's
hi Ellen. Yeah, what we're doing is we'll finish the chat and then we're going to be having a practice. Then we're going to open it up for everyone for discussion. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
save your question. I want to
Yes,
hear
save them.
it.
Thank you. Yes. Um, so I think it's even just an awareness without getting bogged down is knowing that if certain things are like, well, why does this not resonate? Or why does this, it's because we all have a different path. And it really helps to deepen so our understanding of what my path might be. My path is going to be different than your path is going to be different. So then the other piece then is for us to briefly touch on before I have you lead us in a practice, um, is one of the other really profound things that happened for me in learning the Enneagram. And you talked about it in your journey, and what led you to the Enneagram was how our relationships can be the greatest source of connection, belonging, love, and also can be a great source of stress. Stress in relationships is a big thing. And one thing I realized when I understood the Enneagram was, wow, now I understand why this relationship, like why we're not seeing this the same way, why we have different needs, why we see the world differently. And it really was actually kind of emotional for me. Like my husband, I mean, we knew each other as high school sweethearts. At the time I learned about the Enneagram, we'd been married for like 35 years. You'd think I'd know this person. And when I asked, and I'm reading through the Enneagram, and once I kind of sorted out how I see the world, I'm like, well, does he? How does? And it became quite emotional for me. After all those years, I didn't understand fully his journey, his struggles. He's a type one with this inner critic. And it helped, everything makes so much sense. It helped us in our communication and catch, how we understand each other. And when he learned about my type, it's like it was the first time in my life I think I actually felt seen. Like, wow, oh, that's why that must be hard for you when you're always trying to, avoid conflict. And conflict in a relationship is going to happen, right? So I think that understanding the Enneagram in relationship to each other, it's also opens a whole new world of deeper connection. I'm just wondering if you have found that. Obviously, I think you have with what you said.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment first on when I'm noticing different practices, it's so fun to see them through the lens of the Enneagram because I'll see, oh, that's a practice for this
Yes.
personality type, but not for my personality type. So I really want to validate what you said that it's this, again, the law of one, the idea of unity in diversity, that there are nine different ways, but really there are 9 billion or however many people are on the planet
Hmm.
today ways and how important it is to find what's right for you, not feel shame, guilt, or lack in what you're doing, to really find your path. Then the second thing I just wanted to mention, from what you said is this stress that we feel. I love Russ Hudson. He is a very well-known teacher in the Enneagram. And I love something he shared. He said, what triggers us is often a mirror for us. So often when we find ourselves in stress, if we can shift from the contracted state, I like to use this is the contracted state. I'm in blame, victim, and defense. Don't mess with me. Let me tell you how I'm right and you're wrong. But what we're really trying to do when we can release that contraction in a receptive state is to say, this is my lens. What is your lens? And that's the pathway out, is to notice if you're
Mhm.
contracted, blame, victim, and defense, or if you're open, curious, able to ask questions and able to share without being triggered. Because the trigger is you being defensive. It's got to, I mean, it's rooted in deep psychology. It's most of the time back to something that happened in your childhood. The lens of your personality made you hypersensitive. And so then you get triggered, you get stressed, you get contracted. But it's
Mhm.
about noticing in the body center, am I contracted? Am I physically contracted? In the heart, is my heart closed? Am I being loving? I was talking to somebody this morning. Being loving is not being a doormat. And excuse my language, but it's not being an asshole either.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
about having this neutrality. And then,
Mhm.
am I open in my mind? Am I curious? Am I asking questions? Am I sharing information? Or do I need to be right?
Mm.
That's what
Right.
causes the stress. And
Nice. Yeah.
each personality, it's really being aware of the spectrum. And as I
Yeah.
said, it's not taught enough. It's on
Yeah.
this side of the spectrum is the holy ideas and the virtues, having your instincts in balance. That's where we're headed. On this side of the spectrum, in the teachings of the Enneagram personality, is the fixations and the passions. Those are what cause us to be contracted. Those are what cause us to be stressful. So, learning your fixations and your passions and being able to say, am I doing that?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of
It
humility,
takes. Yeah.
authenticity, surrendering. I could go around the whole circle.
Yeah.
That's where the Enneagram is a map for every type. At point 8, you surrender. At point 9, you engage. At point 1, you accept. At point 2, you have humility. Point 3, you have authenticity. At point 4, you're willing to look at yourself. At point 5, you're conscious. At point 6, you're awake. And at point 7, you're in wonder. You're
Right.
you're you're
Yeah.
joyful regardless of the situation. And
Yeah.
yes,
And
I
this
play with this all the time with
all the
my husband, and we laugh all the time because when we're so triggered, it's an opportunity. It's not a problem. And switching from that mental fixation of this is a problem to this is an opportunity. What do I want to do with it?
right. Well, thank you for that description. And I am going to have you now. I think it's a perfect time to lead us in a practice so that we'll leave some space for questions because I know there's questions. So if you would be willing to lead us in a, say, even just a 5 minute practice, and
Five
then
minutes.
that's
I'm thinking,
five
yeah,
minutes.
five
I know
minutes.
it's short. We have these are nice
So,
short little chats, and then that leaves space for people
okay.
to have some questions. So
All right. So, knowing that we're going to fly through this, I just invite you to find your meditative posture and state. And if you will, place your feet on the floor and feel your seat in the chair. Sit up nice and tall and make space inside of you for your breath. So, connecting to the body center at point 8, we surrender. I'm just going to go back through those again. At point 9, we engage with our breath. And at point 1, we allow acceptance into a state of serenity, a state of presence in the body. So breathe in and breathe out. And then play with me and bring your hands into a prayer mudra, touching the heels, the mounds, and the fingertips together. And take your attention from this grounded part of your body, this connection to your innate intelligence, and float your focus up to the space behind your eyes, between your ears. This mudra with your hands helps to integrate the duality within your own head, which is your logic and your imagination. By pressing the hands together, you make space for consciousness at point 5, for awakeness at point 6, and for presence, mental presence at point 7. You step out of your thoughts. You allow a connection to the self with a capital S, to the observer within you. You connect to your high mind with connection, with presence in your body and in your mind. I invite you to layer your hands across your heart, to let your hands touching your chest invite you to come home, to acknowledge, to have space for this emotional intelligence, to remember that at your core, you are love. And to break through the trauma, the training, the negative experiences by inviting a sense of feeling love from the inside out. And we do this by having humility at point 2, by being authentic at point 3, and by being willing to forgive ourselves, to dive into the depths of ourself at point 4. Taking just a second or two to connect with yourself, and then to connect with these 3 centers of intelligence: body, mind, and heart. The invitation I want you to take with you, they're so simple at the body, is to simply be, to take times to pause throughout your day, to do your mindful practices. And in the head, to take time and make space for understanding, for increasing your perception of things, using the little hand movements that I shared to see your personality's lens and open it up for other ways of seeing things. And then at the heart, the invitation from the law of 3 is to know yourself, to take time to discover who you are, to remember that the relationship with yourself and how well you know yourself affects all the relationships that you have with others, with the planet, with the world that you live in. And just take another breath. And I made it. And come back to our space. And I want to hear those questions.
Nancy, thank you for sharing the Enneagram and for guiding us in that practice. And now I'm going to end this recording and then I'll open it up for questions, comments.